There's nothing quite like a shootout to get your adrenaline rushing the same way Pedro Pascal's anxiety kicks in whenever he's around Vanessa Kirby. Anyway, to celebrate the thrill of danger and loud weapons, here are the top 25 shootouts in the movies. To kick this list off, we have David not using a polite way to invite himself. The shootout between him and Major Craver along with his team of mercenaries was a pretty heavy display of power. Although it's kind of hard to believe that one dude was able to combat so many mercenaries at the same time. Yeah, I know he has the experience and stuff, but even so, it does seem a little extra. Having said that, I also think it's fine because it's crazy how literally everything that doesn't go David's way in this film is just treated as if it's a mere inconvenience. The intensity is on point throughout the experience, and David shows us exactly why he's better off not being on any guest list ever. Honestly, it's one of those movies where you find yourself rooting for the villain because of how captivating he is as a character.
Stop it. We all want to say.
Side note, shout out to that one bearded guy who was in every action movie in those days. Bro was like a go-to henchman.
Oh shit! I surrender! I surrender!
Okay, now here's a shootout that happens in the open and manages to give everyone on the streets a mini heart attack. Now, the scene may end with Conflin getting shot in cold blood, but the shootout that precedes it was quite hectic. It's more of a manhunt than a shootout, if you consider the fact that Conflin was severely outnumbered, but he still manages to make a meal of it and sips on some soda too before bidding us farewell. It was a bit odd seeing John Hamm firing a shotgun because I'm more used to seeing him fire up some crazy advertising ideas on Mad Men. Anyway, the shootout was the perfect mix of thrill and tension with a somewhat predictable finale. The corpse scene was quite on point too. Closed eyes and open mouths are very common when looking at war photographs where people were killed, so I guess this sequence gets some bonus points for realism as well.
Well, that set me back.
At number 23 is a film that's titled a bit too seriously. I'm not sure if a lot of people have watched War on Everyone, but take my word, it's got some pretty good moments. Watch them on YouTube if you haven't got time for the whole movie. I'm going to make your lives a little bit easier by presenting the shootout involving Bob, Terry, and James. While the customary exchange of bullets is quite prominent here, it's the cop-out that takes the cake. Bob really had everyone fooled with the way he just played dead on the floor, but all of that changed pretty quickly the moment he played an Uno reverse and dealt the real fate to James. Yes, the line about knowing his last words is pretty much the only thing people remember from this sequence, but there's a lot more to enjoy, especially how nicely dressed all the men are here. It's almost as if these dudes had to go for a fashion show after shooting the living daylights out of each other. At number 22 is a scene where people are going absolutely berserk just for the sake of it. Yeah, the era of parody films may be over for now, but man, what an era it was. We were never short on quality comedic content, and one such example is Taxi 4. You've probably never heard of this movie and may perhaps not even recognize any of its cast members, but one thing's for sure, you'll definitely recognize the movie they're parodying here in the insane shootout scene. Commissioner Gilbert leaves no stone unturned, or in this case, no bullet unfired, because he goes ham without due notice and takes the whole place apart with machine guns and freaking rocket launchers. Now, this may be a French film, but it overdoses on Americanism when it comes to gratuitous shooting. Heck, if Tony Montana had this kind of firepower, there was no way anyone was going to take him down in the finale of Scarface. Well, this one's an unusual take on the holidays, but if you give me Mel Gibson in a shootout against Walter Goggins, then I'm locked in. Heck, it's freaking Braveheart against the ghoul from Fallout. What more could you ask for? So in this film, Mel Gibson is supposed to be a copyright-free version of Santa Claus, and Goggins is a killer known as the Skinny Man, which has to be the most on-the-nose declaration of him being the villain in a movie called Fat Man. Anyway, the shootout between them in the snow was a pretty cool display of violence, pun intended. You know, I'm always surprised by how many people with such severe wounds can still run and fight for dozens of yards in Hollywood productions, but then again, I guess it's the adrenaline rush that keeps them going. The shootout may end with Santa getting beaten, but that was only because of a hidden blade. At the end of the day, it's Kris Kringle who gets to say ho 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 because Ruth manages to take down a skilled assassin with an ancient flintlock pistol. Just like what the popular saying tells us, you should also never bring a kid to a gunfight. Sauter isn't the kind of guy who makes any kind of compromises on his principles, and this situation is no different. The moment French Paul crosses the line by bringing that little girl into the mix, Sauter figured he was going to give us all a show of stone cold killing. You know, I've always felt that a man who wears the top of his shirt completely buttoned fears no one. You could say that he's kind of invincible and doesn't care about the odds or anything else. Bro was giving us the assassin's version of Ultra Instinct and didn't disappoint. Also, in the clip I'm showing you, Sauter lives to tell the tale, but in the alternate version, I heard that he got shot in the head by Slim Biggins. Can anyone confirm this for me in the comments if it's true? Look, I know that I mentioned this would be a list of movies, but when it's one of those rare scenes from modern Star Wars that's actually great, sometimes exceptions can be made. The Mandalorian actually started off as the perfect solution to the dying momentum of the Star Wars franchise. I won't talk about how they gradually messed this one up too, but I will show love to the crazy shootout scene right in the very first episode. Mando and IG-11 going up against those desert bandits was such a refreshing take on a world we'd never really associated with westerns. Apart from the crazy shots, I also loved how they balanced each other's flaws here. Mando lacks IG-11's strength, power, and accuracy, but more than makes up for it by being flexible and using some top-notch improvisation. It really was amazing to see how they made an initially throwaway character such a badass. IG-11 totally stole the show though. Bro was like the RoboCop of the Star Wars universe. One thing's for sure, Michael Mann has a thing for final scene shootouts. And the good thing about it was that he knew how to do it perfectly. The finale of Miami Vice's Crockett and Tubbs facing off against Yero's squad and the Aryan Brotherhood in a shipyard, which surprisingly made for a really suitable venue. Now, the shooting was always going to be on point, especially with the sound design, but I also like the slight conflict between Crockett and Isabella once she finds out that he's a cop. The camera work is on point, and there are actually moments in this sequence that made me wonder if it was even better than the one in Heat. Upon further realization, I still believe this one comes second, but man, it sure was an epic encounter, even with minimal lighting. I was a bit disappointed that this film didn't get a sequel or anything, but I guess cult classics don't get that much attention in the mainstream world.
Morning.
You can always leave it to Edgar Wright when it comes to giving us the ultimate comedic shootout. 2007's Hot Fuzz was the perfect follow-up to Shaun of the Dead, and also happened to be the most successful of the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy. One thing I particularly liked about this shootout is that even though it usually seems stupid and contrived when the villains are all terrible shots, in the context of this specific film, I mean, it actually makes sense. If the villains are all middle-aged to elderly little British folks, then it's not too hard to believe now, is it? And the humor is on freaking point. That priest who yells "Jesus Christ" right before getting shot is pure comedic gold. If you think that this shootout looks like a parody of sorts, then be absolutely right. As per some reports, it said that over 100 action movies were used as inspirations for this script. Side note, shout out to the woman who was dual-wielding handguns on the bike. Yeah, she's a real gangster, until she got done in by Danny's car door. As it turns out, Thor is just as deadly even without his hammer. That one-shot sequence with Tyler taking down one dude after the other was the kind of action and thrill a lot of Hollywood films had been missing for a very long time. It felt realistic too, by including hand combat as well, because in such situations, you're not always going to have the luxury of shooting from a distance. It's what a lot of people have referred to as gun fu. Of course, the main character was never going to die, and Chris Hemsworth gave us a totally macho performance, with Ovi also getting some time to shine. You could even say that a movie like Extraction is the perfect way to walk in John Wick's footsteps. When his gun got jammed but he still managed to cock it, it was such a smooth sequence that I could watch it 100 times and not get bored once. As per his words and his actions, Tony Montana showed us all that little friends can make a massive impact. The final shootout in Scarface is one of many iconic scenes from the movie, and Tony Montana turns up the heat to 1,000 degrees with his new toy. He was able to turn the tide instantly with his little friend, and what followed was absolute chaos and destruction. Bro was so powerful that they had to send the dollar store Terminator to take him down. I also want to give credit to Brian De Palma for the symbolism in the final moments. The shot of "the world is yours" being shown as Tony lays dead in a pool of water was a brilliant move. It's basically conveying the message that yes, the world can be yours, there is a price to pay for it, and a pretty heavy one too.
Say hello to my little friend. You wanna play rough? Okay.
I'm gonna blast your can once and for all right now.
At number 14 is a fancy way to act like savages. Wes Anderson is definitely known for his use of colours and grand stages as something of a trademark for his movies, and the Grand Budapest Hotel is no different. It's also the same reason why this shootout feels like it could be turned into a painting with comedic themes. Anderson's nuances can be seen in the way Dimitri engages with Gustav and Zero, but the shootout between them wasn't just hilarious, it was like art in motion. I love how everyone just peeks out of their doors with their guns wondering what the heck is going on, and they just get involved as if it's no big deal. What started out as a couple of haters going at each other quickly turned into an all-out shootout with no explanation whatsoever. It's so absurd and still so grand. I just hope I never have to walk into such situations when I'm staying in a hotel.
Ceasefire! Ceasefire! Whoa! Stop it! Who's shooting who?
That's Gustav H., the escaped murderer and art thief. I've got him cornered.
Got the wild card, Will.
Okay, we're now presenting a bunch of oldies going at it, but you know what? It's even more surprising when watching Al Pacino duke it out with a villainous Robin Williams. This is a Christopher Nolan movie. Yes, I'm sure a lot of Nolan bros already know this, but a lot of fans probably wouldn't know much about his work prior to the Dark Knight trilogy, save for maybe Memento. This shootout is intense as every other shootout on this list, but what makes it so special is the fighting between Pacino and Williams, which is mostly evened out until Dormer's lack of sleep disorients him. Bro does eventually get the last shot, but it was only a matter of time before he followed suit. This film is actually underrated on so many levels, as a story, as Nolan's direction, and also for Al Pacino and Robin Williams' performances. I mean, it's super rare for the leading characters in a Hollywood movie to die, so Insomnia is obviously one of the rare ones. Alright, it's time for an unhinged shootout. Although, to be fair, you could argue that all shootouts are unhinged, aren't they? Anyway, the final shootout scene from The Guard has tons of badassery in it, especially from Brendan Gleeson's character, Sergeant Jerry Boyle. Bro received a shot in the arm and kept walking like nothing even happened. That's one heck of a tough guy, which is why his eventual victory over Clive felt a lot better to watch. It's an intense shootout, and Don Cheadle's character Wendell also provides enough backup for Boyle to go about his business and wrap up things instantly. Yeah, playing that shooting game in the pub with his pint sure paid off for him. On a serious note, this was a hardcore sequence, even though it may not look like it. The camera angles focus more on the characters, which works quite well against the backdrop of night.
Fuck. Boss!
Yet now we have an unlikely duo of cowboys in Christian Bale and Russell Crowe. It may seem odd to see these two together in such a setting, but then again, 310 to Yuma is an even more unorthodox name. Now, it may not be a blockbuster, but it does have one heck of a shootout. There are some over-the-top moments here, but that's just how it goes in these movies, right? What matters is the fact that both Ben and Dan are able to take out their opponents and get through this ordeal with their lives. Yeah, I think they forgot to turn off friendly fire towards the end of the sequence, but that didn't involve any bullets, so overall, we're good. There are some emotional revelations too, but we're not really going to pay attention to them when you've got so much firepower on the loose.
Damn.
To kick off my top 10, the town makes another appearance, but this time it's the garage shootout scene, which was definitely a lot more detailed than the one on the road. It was crazy to see how quickly the gang fired their first shots immediately after spotting the cops. There's no hesitation at all, but then again, this is how you survive such situations. I also like how the ballistic shields get shredded, because they usually aren't equipped for rifle rounds, although this does depend on the department and its budgets. Having said that, the scene still scores some points of realism. I actually thought for the longest time that this was another Michael Mann film, but then I looked at the credits and saw it was actually directed by Ben Affleck.
Let's get the out of here!
There's a million cops out there! Hey!
Listen, three of us, even if we get out of here, we're getting the full ride.
Quiere morir!
What the fuck are we doing?
If the name of the movie is Sicario, then you can rest assured that the borders ain't safe. Man, the entire scene leading up to this moment is so well done that even if the actual fighting only lasts a few seconds, the tension was incredible, which makes the payoff huge. The look on Kate's face says it all, and Alejandro remained unhinged throughout the shootout. From a cinematic standpoint, Denis Villeneuve's use of overhead shots throughout the movie is a masterclass in creating unease and awe through perspective. He's constantly highlighting how massive the border is and how complicated any effort to regulate it will ultimately end up being. Also, Josh Brolin looked like a total Chad just sitting there, chewing gum as if he's waiting for a hamburger or something. But yeah, the firepower is what elevates the sequence overall. Dillinger really was an enemy to the people, as well as bullets, which is probably why Public Enemies has so many shootout scenes. The main one, in my opinion, is the assault on the lodge, because that felt like an assassination mission that you'd carry out in a game or something. The lack of music meant that the sound of guns would be dominating the scene, so it was great to hear the loud crackling, which added to the realism. Special shout out to Nelson, who was going crazy with the machine gun too. Yeah, there's no doubt in the fact that this one is indeed a Michael Mann movie. Also, I want to mention the bank heist sequence, because even though that shootout was pretty normal, it's the way all the men were posing in the car that was oozing out aura. The Hughes brothers like taking the color out of everything in the Book of Eli, but that specific choice totally made some of the scenes a lot more better. The ambush on the house was a pretty aggressive shootout, but when Denzel Washington's on your side, there's no reason to fear anyone now, is there? The camera work and cinematography in this movie, and particularly this scene, is freaking top-notch stuff. This was among some of the most realistic melee ambush scenes I've watched in a film. You know what else is crazy? It's when you realize that Jim Gordon shoots Dumbledore whilst Malcolm X travels with Meg Griffin. The only character that was missing here was Courage the Cowardly Dog.
He's reloading!
Now, even Matt Damon gets in on the action as he plays Max DaCosta in the largely underrated Elysium. It's a unique shootout scenario involving robots and advanced weapons, but it's a pretty solid effort. Like, this is an insane amount of setup and action getting showcased in under 8 minutes. Plus, I don't know for sure if it was the director's idea, but whoever came up with the whole Wasteland GTR idea is a certified genius. It's easily one of the coolest things you can see in a post-apocalyptic movie. I also liked how the giant laser cutter has a bunch of preset shapes for the type of cut, and you can see the dude rapidly switching through them.
Take that fucker down! Hold your fire! Hold your fire and keep your positions! It's fundamental.
Here's another one from the same mind of Neil Blomkamp, although District 9 is looked at a lot more favorably than Elysium. That's because this movie achieved a lot with a very small budget, including a group of super cool shootout scenes. The first one is the Exo-suit against the Mercenaries, which has Wickers piloting the suit clumsily and still being able to outmatch his opponents. It feels quite authentic, and the action is on point. Then we also have the MNU break-in, where Wickers goes ham with Christopher and goes ballistic. Several years later, and no Hollywood movie has been able to make weapons as cool as these. Man, I'm so glad they didn't make a sequel to this one, because it's timeless in its own right.
Into your Nazi boss.
At number 4 is the consequence of one heck of a mistake. For a man as refined as Highcox, it really was shocking to see him make such a blunder, but that's what happens when mind games are being played. A room full of what are supposed to be important characters to the movie inadvertently experiences a super quick shootout that sees almost all of them dying spectacularly over a meaningless meeting in a bar. But then again, that's exactly what I expect from a Quentin Tarantino film. Everything happens so fast, it's hard to keep a track of who got killed when, but none of that matters when you witness such an action-packed burst. The classics never get old, do they? 1995's Heat will forever remain Michael Mann's masterpiece, and it's so unforgettable that I even brought it up earlier in the video. I've said all that can be said about this particular shootout, most notably the sound design and the iconic Val Kilmer reload. Speaking of which, rest in peace, man. You gave tens of millions of us some extremely enjoyable performances during your career. Now, back to the scene. It's so lengthy and still so impactful because your eyes will simply not waver. This really is one of the best examples of classic filmmaking.
Hey, let's go!
There's a bank robbery that keeps extending to the point where the dudes are on the highway shooting to their heart's content. Toby and Tanner may be together during the robbery, but it's mostly Tanner who's doing the shooting, and he was an absolute beast too. Bro backed the truck out from the bank to get away, stopped to deal with the following cars, snapped his brother out of his panic, and even refocused his mind on getting to the casino. And when the odds finally got to them, Tanner still gave his brother the time he needed to get away from the scene of the crime. Special stuff right there. topping today's list is raw action, just how it should be. Den of Thieves was definitely like a surge of adrenaline to its viewers, and the final shootout sequence perfectly encapsulates it. This was one tightly edited and action-packed shootout scene because it shows. The build-up of tension goes on for a while, and then boom, everything goes haywire from that point onward. And it's the kind of action that makes all the bros go, heck yeah! It's lengthy for sure, but not boring at all. And yes, I did feel bad about Ray dying, even though that was pretty much the only way it was going to end for him. Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.
Fascist!